Free coffee. Anyone who knows me knows I'm an avid coffee drinker. I drink coffee 24/7. As a matter of fact, I have a Facebook page with the same name. Check it out. Anyway, I've got a very pleasant yet very disturbing story to tell. So here we go. After work, while waiting for my ride, I decided to go over to a local coffee shop and grab a cup of coffee. So I strolled on over there, walked in the door, up to the counter, and ordered a medium coffee with cream and sugar, just how I like it. Don't judge. The cashier lady, not my favorite cashier lady, a beautiful blonde goddess with angelic blue eyes that I'd been crushing on for months. I didn't see her anywhere. As a matter of fact, I didn't see anyone else either. Just me and the new girl. An older lady, kinda creepy, with stringy gray hair, age spots, and these effed up looking green eyes. Anyway, she went to go make my coffee. Seconds later, she came back with said coffee and placed it on the counter in front of me, rang it up, and told me the price. I, with anticipation of tasting this wonderful concoction that now sits in front of me, whipped out my debit card and proceeded to swipe it through the card reader. Then the most horrific thing happened. Those 4 little words that no one with a debit card ever wants to read came flashing on the screen. Unable to read card. No, this can't be happening. So I swiped my card again. Same thing. Again, same thing. Ugh. So the creepy cashier lady says, "Let me see if I can swipe it through on my side." Okay, anything at this point. So she swiped the card through on her side. Same thing. Why, Lord? Why? Meanwhile, I could hear the coffee calling my name. Mike. Mike. Oh, the torture. She then looked at me and says, "Hey, don't you work at the grocery store across the street?" I said, Yes, I do. Here's the disturbing part. She says, "It's just coffee. You can have it on the house." The angels started singing, all the planets aligned, and for that brief moment, all is right with the world. I got free coffee. Although I am very appreciative of the gesture from the weird cashier lady, her comment of it being just coffee disturbs me. It is not just coffee. It is a fuel that it takes to get stuff done, a lifeline for some, a comfort for others. It is never just coffee. "Thank you, ma'am," I said as I took the cup off the counter, walked back through the door, and back over to where I was sitting waiting for my ride. I lifted the cup up to my mouth, fully prepared to taste this warm sensation. Nothing came out. I'm thinking the lid must be closed. So I lowered the cup down to check it out. Nope, not closed. Lifted it again. Still nothing. I could feel the coffee moving around inside the cup, so I knew it was full. I lowered the cup once again, this time taking off the lid to see what the problem was. What I saw inside almost made me want to stop drinking coffee. Almost. As I lifted the lid, I saw the 2 beautiful blue eyes of my favorite coffee lady floating in my cup. One must have plunged a hole in the lid, stopping the coffee from coming out. I was in shock, horrified. Then I thought about it. There was no way that beautiful creature would ever go out with the like of me. But now, I'd always have a piece of her wherever I'd go. So I took the eyes out of the cup, shaken the coffee off of them, and put them in my pocket. Put the lid back on the cup, and commenced to drink my coffee. Damn, it was good. My ride finally arrived and drove me home. I placed the eyeballs on my nightstand, facing the bed. So every morning, I could look into the eyes of my favorite cashier lady, just like I've dreamt for months. Dreams do come true. Mine did. Three two 320220. I was 14 when I first saw it. It was summer during that time, and my mom just called me that she bought the newest Super Mario for my N64. Boy, did I love that game. I spent hours fighting Bowser, and I still remember that euphoric feeling I got when I finally defeated him. Even though this was years ago, I really miss those innocent times. I never really knew my parents. Ever since they separated, I spent my entire childhood living with my uncle. I'm 38 now, but every time someone mentions it, I just try to change the topic. All I remember about them is that they have really well-paying jobs, and that they spoiled me with all kinds of stuff: clothes, video games, cassette tapes, etc. Despite my rough childhood, my life is actually going pretty steady. I have a job that pays the bills, and a girlfriend that I choose to spend an entire lifetime with. She's lovely, really. I love her to death. But she's got nothing to do with what I'm facing right now. One day, my uncle and I decided to go visit my dad's house for the weekend. You see, after my parents separated, my dad was already financially free. He was an expert with money and had a plan to get a house for the whole family. But he had other plans. My mom, on the other hand, went to live with her sisters. Don't get me wrong, my mom was also good with money. She just didn't want to live alone. I felt something was wrong during the whole journey there. With me in the front seat and my uncle driving right beside me, sure was one long, quiet car ride. I just couldn't quite locate the problem. By the time we made it into the house, the gate was already open. I walked right in and saw my dad standing on the porch, smiling, as if he was expecting us. He had something in his hands, a tray with 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and 2 cups of milk. I never really could forget that image of him, just standing there with an odd posture, with a bright grin, staring at us while we closed the gate. That was the first time I actually felt afraid of my dad. My dad wasn't strict in my childhood. I don't remember him giving me lectures about me sleeping past my bedtime. He would just let me play video games all night, even though I have a rule to follow that he clearly made. But something about him that day really gives me the creeps. I ran right towards him with a feeling that he might react. Certainly he did, and offered me and my uncle the sandwiches and milk. We sat on the porch together with my dad, and it turns out me and my dad actually have the same taste in music. Once he turned the radio on, he said that he's in touch with the DJs working at the radio station he was tuning into, which seemed to be believable because I recall my dad's friends working as a DJ. But the surprising thing was that he knew what songs were going to play, and most of them were my favorite songs I used to play in my Walkman. I immediately asked my dad how come he knew what songs were going to play, and he responded with, "I already told you, I'm in touch with the DJs playing in the station, and while I was cleaning up yesterday, I happened to see your box of cassette tapes lying around and sent it to them with a letter." I know it seems unbelievable at first, but trust me, they sent a letter to him and it looked completely genuine. It has everything handwritten and has a stamp on it too. It seemed my dad planned out everything we were going to do that weekend. It already started getting dark and we had to get inside. I took a shower and saw some of the toys that seemed to belong to a toddler in the sink. Or at least, that's what it seemed to belong to. It sure was strange that my dad has these things, but it kind of brought me a sense of nostalgia. I really don't know why, but those toys seemed to belong to like a younger me, younger than 14. Even though they were toys I would remember playing with, I don't remember them. Yet, I feel like I did. I headed straight to the bedroom while my dad and my uncle were out having a conversation about something I couldn't quite hear. I was already tired at that time and fell fast asleep. Sunday. I woke up with the sun shining across the room. I guess my dad happened to open the curtains while I was asleep. I walked across the hallway to see my uncle and my dad cooking breakfast. "Hey, sleepyhead, you really slept like a log last night, didn't you?" my dad said. He said this with the same grim smile he had yesterday, but I guess it just seems to be a part of him. I decided to just ignore him since I was still a bit tired even after a full night of sleep. My uncle seemed to be joyous too. He didn't say anything to me, as usual, but if you were there, you would see why. My dad served me a hot plate, bacon and eggs. Sure was a good meal. My dad was always better in cooking than my mom. After the meal, I went to get a glass of water and headed straight to my bedroom. I almost forgot to tell you, my dad's house wasn't the same house I grew up in. Yet I always get a continuous case of déjà vu in his household, and I seem to be familiar with everything there. My dad knocked on the door. "Can I come in?" "Sure." I opened the door to see my dad with the same smile like he always does, and he asked me if I want to plant some flowers of his. Without any doubt, I agreed to help him. I followed him towards a sliding door placed in the back of the kitchen and into the backyard. He told me to wait for him while he was getting the gardening tools in his shed, which was across the gate. I happened to see something lying on the ground while I was waiting for him. It looked like a clothes iron, but with all kinds of gizmos that I couldn't quite understand. There was a gear manual which changes a series of numbers shown on the front of the object, and a button right beside it. Curiosity got the best of me, and I wrote down a series of numbers which are 3232020. I truly don't know why I wrote that specific number. It seemed to be something I just came up with. After that, I pressed the button. I heard a voice saying, "Who are you?" After that, nothing happens. My dad just came out of the shed with his gardening tools, and we both ended the day with a nice meal he cooked up. End of story. Today is the 23rd of March, 2020, and I kid you not. I saw a kid looking just like me in my bedroom with the same contraption I held 24 years ago. And then, he just disappeared into thin air. Molly. The Babcock house wasn't really a part of our town. It sat isolated from the rest of the community at the end of an old dirt road. It was easy to forget that it had ever existed in the first place. I don't know just how long it had been abandoned, certainly before my time. The rumors said there had been a fire around 50 years ago that had killed the residents. There was probably some truth to that. There were no signs of a fire inside. Wood was blackened and charred, and the house honestly seemed on the verge of collapse. Nobody was surprised when the city decided to tear it down, and almost nobody showed any interest in stopping it. There wasn't much to preserve, although there wasn't to say there was absolutely nothing. The almost in almost nobody was Miss Isabel Cameron. She was something of a history buff. Outside of teaching at the local high school, she was the chairman of our little town's Historical Preservation Society. We had very little of note to preserve, save for some old relics. Northern Ontario wasn't an area of great historical significance, and our little town had no claim to fame. I chose not to say what town this is, since I'd liked it to stay that way, ever since I was young. I'd always liked the quietness of my home. It was safe and out of the way. I always thought that was what home was supposed to be. When Miss Cameron had heard about the demolition of the Babcock house, she tried to save it. Nobody bothered to rally behind her cause, and when she realized she was fighting a losing battle, her priority shifted to preserving the contents of the old house. I don't know if she was doing it out of genuine interest, or if she'd somehow convinced herself that there was something in there worth saving, documents or antiques. I can't say for sure what she was looking for, but she saw us as an opportunity to get her students involved. I was just there for the extra credit along with one other girl, Naomi Rush. While she was hardly my closest friend, we still got along just fine and had hung out a few times before. I'd figure it would just be us, but Miss Cameron had decided to bring in Eddie. I can't say I knew him well, but I knew of him, and that was enough. By all accounts, Eddie Stevens was a self-assured, rich and cocky a-hole. I don't think he had a single genuine friend in the world. At some point during the past week, he'd gotten on Miss Cameron's bad side, and so for detention, he'd been asked to come along. Through the bulk of the afternoon, we'd managed to pack up anything that looked remotely salvageable, and most of it was in the foyer. To the credit of the Babcock house, it probably would have been really nice back in the day. Sure, it looked like the house from the Addams family, but they still lived in a mansion. The day was almost over, and I was bringing down what I intended to be my last box for the day. Eddie was lounging in the foyer and didn't look as if he was remotely interested in doing anything resembling work. He was standing by the window, looking out at the dark clouds above us, and it took him a few moments before he noticed me. "Is that your last box?" he asked. "I think," I replied. "I'll need to go back up to make sure." Eddie rolled his eyes. "Just leave it. This place isn't coming down for another week or so. Can you ask Miss Cameron to hurry up?" "Why? You got someplace to be?" I asked. "No, but I'm tired of wasting my day here," he replied. "None of this crap is worth saving." He moved over to a box that I'd packed and nudged it. A few damp old newspapers sat inside. I think he was trying to make a point, but I honestly thought those papers could possibly be valuable for the historical record they kept, if nothing else. "How do you know what is and isn't worth saving?" Miss Cameron said from the top of the stairs. Eddie looked up at her, biting his tongue to stop himself from retorting as she descended the steps. I saw Naomi behind her. "You never know just how valuable something is until you've had a good look at it," she said. "I want to do one more walkthrough, just to make sure we've got everything. If you're so eager to get going, start getting these boxes out to the van before it rains." The prospect of manual labor seemed to upset poor Eddie, and as much as I hated the idea of helping him, I knew that I had to. Still, I let him take the first box, just so he got a head start on the suffering while I went over to Naomi. "Find anything interesting?" I asked. "Not a whole lot," she replied. "This is all from one of the bedrooms. I guess it belonged to a little girl." She shifted the contents of her box to show me what was inside. Most of it looked like very old children's toys. A small rag doll sat on the top. It looked to be in better condition than everything else. "Isn't it cute?" Naomi asked. She caught me looking at it. She glanced over at Miss Cameron to confirm she was out of earshot before whispering, "I think I'll keep this one, as a souvenir." Part of me wanted to tell her not to do that, but honestly, how much harm could it really have caused? Eddie sprinted back in through the door, swearing under his breath. "It's starting to rain," he bitched. He looked as if he'd been hit by a single raindrop. "We should just leave and Miss Cameron can come back for this stuff later." "It's just a bit of rain," I said. "I think you'll live." Even as I said that, I could hear the distant thunder, and both of us knew I'd be eating those words pretty soon. Sure enough, the downpour started as Eddie and I were loading up the van, and when it hit hard. A cloudy sky soon turned into rain that came down in sheets and wind stronger than anything I'd seen before. The forecast had said the skies would be clear and clear. Somebody effed up. Miss Cameron and Naomi were waiting for us in the foyer by the time we came back in, soaked to the bone. Miss Cameron stared out the window, regarding the rain as if it was a particularly unpleasant crap taken in her cornflakes. "Leave the boxes," she said. "I don't want the rain damaging them. Let's just give it a few minutes and see if it passes." "Why not just leave now?" Eddie asked. "You said it yourself the rain would damage some of the stuff in there." Miss Cameron gave him a look that said, "Did you not just hear me say we should wait and see if the rain lets up?" She didn't dignify Eddie's question with an answer, and I can tell that really got on his nerves. "Let's just chance the rain then," he said, and picked up another box. I wondered if he needed to practice to have listening skills that bad, or if it came naturally to him. "I said wait," Miss Cameron said, but she got ignored in favor of Eddie's blatant idiocy. With a box in his arms, he made his way to the door and tried to open it. The operative word, of course, is tried. He tugged that thing as if he was reading a Playboy, but the door didn't budge. "What the F? Jenny, can you open this?" Miss Cameron said, "Just open. Let's finish this so we can go." I'd only gotten a glimpse of what was in the box Eddie was carrying, but it looked like some sort of the toys Naomi had brought down. Nothing that would be too damaged by the rain, so I figured it would be fine to help him. I reached out to pull out the door and found that it was stuck fast. "Did you lock it?" I asked. I instinctively looked above the door handle for a lock, but if there was one, it wasn't there. "No, I didn't effing lock it. We're stuck." Eddie set the box down and resorted to brute force. He kicked the door as if he was anything stronger than a pasty white trust fund kid. With all of his awesome strength, he achieved the incredible, godlike feat of hurting his own foot. "Nice going, dumbass," I said. He didn't pay me much mind and just swore under his breath. "Language," Miss Cameron said. She'd taken her cell phone out of her pocket, her brow furrowed. "If we're stuck, let's just call someone. Does anyone have bars?" I reached into my pocket for my phone, only to find that it had no signal. Judging by the look on Naomi's face as she checked her phone, she wasn't faring much better herself. "Are you kidding me?" Eddie snapped. "Well, let's just break a window or something. This place is coming down anyways." "Eddie, don't," Miss Cameron warned, but Eddie's stupidity could not be contained. In his infinite wisdom, he'd picked up an old coat rack from the corner of the room and assaulted the nearest window with it. Now, in a sane and reasonable world, the window would have shattered and Miss Cameron would have given Eddie crap for being a reckless dipshit. However, apparently logic had been on the other side of the door when it had closed and inexplicably locked, and because of that, the coat rack splintered. The glass shook, but didn't break, and Eddie was left holding the broken wood with a stupefied look on his face. This may be an inappropriate time to mention this, but I really feel bad for whoever set up his trust fund. What a waste. "Eddie, relax," Miss Cameron said as Eddie slammed his broken piece of wood against the window again. Predictably, this got him nowhere. After caveman logic had failed him, Eddie's next decision was to double down on hitting the window with things. There was a dining room with an old table and chair set in a room close to us, and Eddie appropriated one of the chairs for his smashing-related purposes. He succeeded in breaking the chair, then staring at the window, slack-jawed and silent. Miss Cameron rushed to his side, ready to stop him from sacrificing another piece of that innocent dining room set in his crusade against the window. "Relax," she snapped. "Just sit down. Let's not break anything else." Eddie didn't talk back to her this time. It was refreshing. "Obviously we can't break the front door or the windows, so how are we about to stop trying? How about we stop trying? It's pouring rain out there anyways. Let's just keep our heads and stay calm. Once the rain clears, we can try the back doors." Eddie just listened as Miss Cameron spoke before nodding. He stared at the window, still in disbelief. Naomi came up beside me. She'd watched everything unfold in silence, and I don't think she knew just what to say. She'd seen exactly what I'd seen, though. "The window shouldn't be that hard to break," she murmured. I saw a bulge in her sweater pocket, no doubt the rag doll from earlier. "Maybe it's reinforced or something," I said. In the back of my mind, I wondered why a burnt-out old house would have intact reinforced windows. "Maybe." Naomi didn't sound convinced, but we both knew there wasn't any other logical answer. Miss Cameron massaged her temples. "Let's just take it easy," she said. "Clearly we have some time to kill. Let's just focus on why we came here and try to keep working, all right?" I could tell she wasn't a fan of the idea herself, but there really was nothing else we could have done. I think she was just trying to keep our minds occupied. I respected that. I did another check of the lower level. I was already sure we'd have gotten everything, but it was something to do. Naomi had been sent upstairs and Miss Cameron was supervising Eddie as he tried to ensure we still had a way out of the house. Judging by the faint swearing and scolding I could hear, it wasn't going well. I won't lie, I was starting to get a little nervous. Obviously I didn't want to be trapped in a rundown old mansion, and the thought of having to spend the night there had crossed my mind. I knew that was absurd though. Eddie's dumb brute force would probably get us out, and if it didn't, someone would notice that we were missing, and it wasn't a secret where we'd gone. If mine, Naomi's, or Eddie's parents could reach us through our phones, they'd probably call the police or stop by the Babcock house themselves. Either way, Somebody was going to come for us. There was really nothing to worry about. That said, Naomi's sudden screams didn't exactly erase any latent paranoid fears that lingered in my mind. Even from deep inside the house, I could hear the thud of her footsteps as she tore through the halls and towards the stairs. I arrived in the foyer just in time to see her make it to the ground. She tripped and fell, then righted herself and kept running until she was almost pressed up against the door. She glanced back behind her, shaking almost violently as she did. Miss Cameron rushed over to her, putting her hands on her shoulders and frantically calling her name. "Naomi! Naomi!" Naomi didn't respond at first. She just sucked in terrified lungfuls of air before finally seeming to notice that she'd been grabbed. I've never seen her like this before. I've never seen her this outright terrified. "What's wrong? Naomi, talk to me." Miss Cameron looked into her eyes as Naomi finally found her voice. "There's a girl. Upstairs. She's upstairs." Miss Cameron frowned and looked up towards the stairs. There was no sign of anyone else. She stared for a few minutes before glancing over at Eddie. "Go upstairs, take a look around." "Wait, what? Why me?" "Just go." This was the first time I'd ever seen Miss Cameron outright snap at someone, and Eddie actually recoiled a bit. I glanced at Naomi, wondering if I could help her at all before I realized there wasn't much I could do for her. "I'll come with you," I said, much as I hated the idea of going anywhere with Eddie. If there was someone else in the house, it was probably best for him not to go alone. If Eddie had any cute remarks to make, he didn't make them. He just glanced at me, a look on his face as if he'd just ingested pure, unrefined crap and hadn't yet gotten a taste of it out of his mouth. He didn't argue, though. "All right," he said, and there was no way he could have said it with more hesitation if he tried. He led the way upstairs, and I followed behind him. Despite having just been up there less than half an hour ago, something felt off. Maybe it was just my own nerves. Maybe someone else really was up there. It was hard to say for sure. "Hello?" Eddie called. I would have been more surprised if someone actually had answered him. Instead, his voice rang hollow through the halls, and he stood there like a toddler with a soiled diaper, looking around as if he expected someone to just walk out and say, "Hi." While there was no verbal reply, there was still some kind of response. A faded rubber ball rolled out of a nearby bedroom. Both Eddie and I stared at it as it rolled into the hall and lightly bumped against my shoe. We both stood there, dead silent, and when someone spoke, it wasn't one of us. "Molly?" It sounded like a child, a little girl. Eddie seemed to hesitate for a moment before he finally grew a set of balls and took a step forward. "Hello?" he said again. He took a few more steps towards the door, and as he did, I saw something moving in the darkness beyond. The small pale figure of a young girl of about 8 emerged from the bedroom. She dragged her feet as she walked, and as we caught sight of her, I felt a sudden panic set in. I knew why Naomi started screaming now. I wanted to scream too. Once she'd worn a pretty white dress. Now that dress was tattered and stained with dark blood. She left a trail of it behind her, and you can clearly see each individual bullet wound in her chest. Her breaths were raspy, and each one poured fresh blood down her pale chin. Her eyes were glassy and unfocused. She looked like she'd just been killed. "Molly?" she repeated. Her voice was a low, wet gurgle. She lurched towards us, and Eddie let out an effeminate shriek of terror before he bolted for the stairs. Honestly, he was a smart one in this situation. I stood there, frozen to the spot and unable to move. The panic had set in, but it had left me immobilized. I took a step back, but I didn't run. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I tried to rationalize this. I tried to find a logical explanation. "Give her back. Give her back. Give her back. Give her back to me." The hands of the dead girl stretched out towards me as she came for me. Finally, I ran. I nearly tripped over my own feet as I ran for safety. The stairs were too far away. There was a bedroom that was much closer, and I went in there. I slammed the burnt-out door behind me. I figured that she wouldn't get through that. She was probably just a kid in a costume playing some elaborate prank. I had about 30 seconds to catch my breath before I was proven dead wrong. Where is Molly? The girl stepped through the closed door as if it wasn't even there. In the dim light of that room, I could see a pale glow in her eyes. With nowhere to run, I screamed and I fell on my ass before frantically scooting backwards. She continued her slow advance towards me, and I was running out of the room to scoot back. In my panic, I didn't hear the burnt-out wood creaking beneath me, not until it was way too late. The last thing I remember is falling. I don't remember the sudden stop. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up, but at least I did wake up. It was a slow, groggy process. My head was still throbbing, and I could hear the wind howling against the old house. Slowly I sat up. My entire body was sore. Everything around me was dark, but I was pretty sure I was still alive. In the distance, I could hear a quiet sobbing, and my heart skipped a beat. Oh good, the creepy child wasn't gone. Although I suppose that something had to give since she hadn't killed me at least. Slowly I stood up. The distant sobbing was still there, and I hesitated for a moment before drawing closer to it. It was too dark to see where I was going, and I really didn't have anywhere else to go. My voice caught me in my throat before I managed to call out, "Hello?" The sobbing stopped. For a moment I wondered if I'd regret this. "Where's Molly?" asked a voice. I knew it belonged to that little girl, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. "I don't know," I replied. "I don't know who Molly is." A few moments passed before the little girl spoke again. "I'm cold. I'm sick of being alone. Are you gonna play with me?" I don't know. I could? It wasn't a sincere offer, more of a confused attempt to continue the conversation. "What's your name?" "Victoria," she replied. "Victoria Babcock. Who are you?" "My name's Jennifer. Jennifer Waters. Jenny to my friends." "Are you my friend?" Victoria asked. I hesitated before answering. It's not exactly every day where you get to have a conversation with a ghost. "Yeah," I said. "I think we're friends. Just don't chase me anymore, okay?" "Okay." I felt a cold chill down my back and turned to look behind me. In the darkness, I could see the shape of the little girl. I could hear the blood dripping from her corpse, and the memory of her visage turned my stomach. "Do you know where we are, Victoria?" I asked. "We're in the basement," she replied. "The basement? Had I seriously just fallen through 2 fucking floors?" "I can show you the way up," Victoria said. She offered me a hand, and after a moment I reached out through the darkness and took it. Her skin felt like ice. It was so cold that it almost burned. "Jesus, you're freezing," I said. I almost pulled back on instinct. "Do you want my sweater or something?" Honestly, I don't know why I even offered. Maybe it was just out of some sense of obligation. Victoria was silent for a minute. It was too dark to see her face. "Can I have it?" she finally asked. Sure, I guess." I took my sweater off. The air around me was chilly, but Victoria seemed like she needed it more, even if she was already dead. I draped it over her and tried not to think about all the blood that was getting on it. In the darkness, I saw Victoria pulling it tighter around herself. She exhaled contentedly. "Thank you. You're kind. Here, come with me. The stairs are here." She took my hand again. The sweater hadn't warmed her up any, but at least she seemed happier. There wasn't much more light around as we ascended the stairs. We ended up in a small side room that had probably once been a parlor. Through the windows, I could see that the sky was dark. I must have been out for a few hours at least. How hard had I hit my head? I thought unconsciousness was only supposed to last for a few seconds. Instead, I'd been out for hours. The rain wasn't coming down as hard as I could see flashing police lights through the window. At least I probably had a ride home. "Are my friends still here?" I asked. "No," Victoria replied. "The boy broke a door. They left. I tried to keep them here, but I wasn't strong enough." "You were the one locking us in?" I asked. "Someone took Molly. I can't let her go." Molly. That name again. "Is Molly your doll?" I asked. Victoria gave a slow half nod, and I remembered the rag doll Naomi had taken. She stuffed it in her pocket, and she probably had it on her when she fled too. "I think I know where she is," I said after a few moments. I looked towards the flashing police lights through the window, and as I did, I heard people moving through the house. "Bring Molly back to me," Victoria said softly. "Please. She's all I have left. Mom and Dad are gone. I'm gone. I'm cold. I'm lonely." "It'll be all right," I promised her. "I'll get Molly back for you, I promise." Victoria looked up at me. As horrifying as she looked, there was still something innocent about the way she held my sweater tightly around her. I could hear other voices in the house now, a man's voice that I didn't recognize. "She's down there. There's some stairs around the side. Send the paramedics down." Paramedics? I looked past Victoria and watched a man and a woman going down the basement stairs we'd just come up. I watched as they disappeared into the darkness, then looked at Victoria. Something was wrong. I walked towards the door and stepped out into the hall. I could see a hole in the floor from where I'd fallen, and I could see a police officer standing over it. Miss Cameron stood beside him. She looked like shit. "Be careful with her. She'd had one hell of a fall," a voice said from the hole as I slowly approached the edge to look down. I saw myself laying on a pile of broken wood. My eyes were closed. There were 2 police officers around me, watching as the paramedics lifted me onto a gurney. "No," was all I could say in my own broken, trembling voice. "It's okay," Victoria said from behind me. "You're not cold like I am. Not yet. I hope you come back and play soon, though." I turned to look at her and saw her standing in the hall, blood-stained and holding my sweater tightly against her before my world went white. I spent the next few days in the hospital. I'd broken a few ribs and had one hell of a concussion, but I'd been told I was going to make a full recovery with no lasting side effects. I wasn't sure if what I'd seen while I was unconscious was a weird dream or an actual communication with a ghost. There was one way to know for sure, though. I did some research on the Babcock house when I had the chance. There wasn't much to dig up. The records were fairly old and the house wasn't well known outside of my little town. What I did find, however, was that its former owner, Niles Babcock, had been a boxer and done pretty well for himself. Maybe too well. He'd supposedly been killed in a house fire, but at the time there had been rumors that the fire was only meant to cover up something else. Supposedly, Babcock had made some enemies in Toronto, and those enemies were part of a little mob outfit. After he died, there were rumors that Babcock, his wife, and their 8-year-old daughter had been gunned down first. I didn't find anything that could verify that, but it felt too specific to be a coincidence. If nothing else, the name of the little girl who died in that house made me sure what I'd seen had been real. Her name had been Victoria Babcock. I went back to school the following week, and things seemed almost normal. Almost. I met up with Naomi the first chance I got. She still seemed a bit shaken by what she'd seen, and I was on the fence on telling her about the encounter I'd had. She'd seen enough as it was. I still had to get that doll from her, though. I probably could have stolen it from her using some clever trickery, but honestly, she'd seen the ghost of Victoria Babcock too, and I don't think she was too fond of keeping the memory of her encounter. "Just take it," she said, and handed it over to me without much ceremony. She'd left it on her bedroom desk, and it looked out of place amongst the other plushies. It's been creeping me out ever since I took it from that place. I thanked her and pocketed it, and that would have been the final order of business before Naomi spoke again. "That little girl just wanted her doll, right?" she asked. "I think so," I replied. Naomi was silent for a moment. "She must have died really badly. She looked like she'd been shot, didn't she?" "I think she was," I replied. "I read up on that house. Far as I can tell, nobody ever proved it was a mob hit, but, well, if the shoe fits." Jesus, that poor kid. Naomi sighed and rubbed her temples. "Would you mind if I went with you?" I took it. "I guess it feels like I should help return it." "If you want to," I said. Honestly, I was happy just to have some company. Naomi didn't smile. She just nodded, and that was really all there was to say on the matter. The Babcock house still had a few days left before the demolition crews tore it down. They had already set up a fence, but it really wasn't that hard to get past it. The house was as abandoned as ever as Naomi and I approached it. The front door had been taken off of its hinges, probably to prevent it from getting stuck again. Molly the doll sat comfortably in my pocket, and I took her out before offering her to Naomi. "You wanted to give her back," I said. Naomi just took the doll and looked around. "Victoria," she called. Her voice was small and trembling. There was no answer, nor was there a creepy ball rolling out of some darkened room. There was just us in an empty old house. "Victoria." It was my turn to call out now, and there was still no response. The burnt-out ruins sat as quiet as ever, and it almost made me wonder if I'd simply hallucinated everything. "Here," a voice said behind me, and I turned to look. There was no immediate sign of Victoria, but I thought I caught a glimpse of something small and white moving through the distant trees. I didn't say a word to Naomi. I just took off towards it. "Jenny?" I heard her call before she tried to follow me. I could see the movement through the trees, and it led me deeper through them. The path was rough and worn. Naomi and I were probably the first two people who'd come down it in a very long time, but I was sure it would lead us somewhere, and I wasn't surprised. The cemetery turned onto an old dirt road that I'd passed a few times before. It was one of those old small cemeteries that are full of old graves. There was no chapel beside them, and there was only a small shack near the back for what I assume was a shed full of tools from the groundskeeper. Naomi was silent beside me as we looked upon what I knew was the final resting place of the Babcock family, and she didn't say a word as I made my way through the gate and began to walk amongst the faded tombstones. It didn't take me long to find Victoria Babcock, and it didn't take me long to break into the shed near the back of the property. We didn't dig deep. I didn't want to disturb the grave, but we dug deep enough. Reverently, Naomi placed Molly in the hole we dug above Victoria's grave. "I didn't know she was yours," was all she said before I began to push the soil back into the hole. It wasn't much, but it was something. A cold wind blew through the cemetery. There wasn't a sound to be heard or another soul present aside from myself and Naomi. I think that was a good thing. Molly was back where she belonged, and Victoria was at peace. Or at least as much peace as we could have granted her. I think that was enough. Slowly, I turned and headed back through the woods. Naomi lingered for just a moment longer before she followed me. We'd never speak about Victoria Babcock or Molly again, but that was alright. There's a gas station where the Babcock house once stood now, and there's no memory of the house that used to be there or the horrible things that happened inside. I honestly think it's better that way. The house was only invited more disturbances for the Babcock family, and I don't think anyone wants that. Now, Victoria Babcock and her family should rest in peace. And I hope that they do. I can't see anyone's faces. I live in a part of a world where there are a lot of sky bridges, footbridges, overpasses, building connectors sprawl all over the city where I live. like a nervous system, or traces on a circuit board. In fact, in my city, sky bridges can link up over 40 buildings in the busiest and most built-up parts. However, this story isn't about those huge, lavish sky bridges that link office buildings, although it can pertain to them. My story starts from a small footbridge. To get to my house from the train station, there is a newly built footbridge. Before this was built up, the road was fairly easy to cross on ground level, but thanks to a new estate being developed, the district council had decided to redevelop the four-way crossing and put obstructions on the roadsides so it would be hard or dangerous to cross unless you use the newly built footbridge. Flower beds, obstructing road signs, stone decorations, and handrails litter the edges of the crossing and became a general nuisance to the locals, and even undercover cops were spotted finding people who didn't use the footbridge and jaywalked across. On a late night returning home, I had to use this footbridge. I was coming back from a reunion of a good friend who had come to visit me from my home country, and I had a bit to drink. Enough that I didn't want to risk the danger of bypassing that footbridge I mentioned earlier. In this new footbridge, they had installed an elevator with a camera, with which you could observe the interior from the outside, next to the elevator doors. Safety measures, understandable seeing that the lift was small and secluded enough to be conspicuous. My drunk self had opted for the elevator, not being in the best of moods. My phone had died, it was cold and raining, and I needed to get some rest to show my friend around the city the next day. Not having anything to do, I watched the camera display while I waited for the lift to descend from footbridge level to ground level. Scan lines had appeared on the monitor, and I chuckled at the cliché presentation it gave, an eerie view of an empty lift carriage. This wait wasn't long, as the footbridge wasn't very high. The lift doors opened, and I prepared myself to step in. I would have stepped in if I hadn't hesitated and looked at the camera display again. The camera in the lift was pointed so that a little of the elevator doors were visible, but it was mostly showing the elevator carriage. I had barely moved my feet when I saw myself on the camera display step into the elevator. I froze. Me, or someone wearing the same clothes as me, carrying the same umbrella as me, had walked into the elevator according to the camera display, but physically before my eyes. I was the only one at the elevator doors. I couldn't move. My eyes were transfixed onto the display in shock. It was only when I saw me turn around and start to look up that I freaked out. I shut my eyes, opened them, and the camera display showed an empty elevator car. What was going through my head was racing through my nerves. At the same time, I was in a spot of denial. I thought the drink had got to me and tried to shake it off. I got into the elevator and made my way up to footbridge level. Nothing of interest happened during the short elevator ride or the walk across the footbridge and down the stairs on the other side. Despite my fear and shock, it was fairly an uneventful trip across an unwanted footbridge. I started to walk into my village, checking my back and sides for anything weird. Nothing. Even seeing normal passers-by without them turning mad and attacking me, or ghostly figures floating towards me. Well, I thought it was a normal trip home. I started noticing the weird things when I got home. The door was locked, and I had forgotten my key. Thankfully, I heard my uncle near the door. I called for him to open the door, and he answered. I thought it was strange, though, how from opening the door to letting me in, he was looking elsewhere. He opened the door to me with his head turned, so that he was looking over his left shoulder. When asked what was up, he replied that something had just caught his attention. When he stepped away to let me in, he did it so his body turned and his head wouldn't have to face me. I thought he was just tired and wasn't all there, much like me. When I got to my room, I started recalling why I was feeling uneasy on the way home, aside from the elevator fiasco. Everyone who passed me had without fail had their head turned away from me when they were in my sight, one way or another. I had not seen a single face on the way home, even though I had seen multiple people. While mulling it over in my room, I shook my head. I wanted to check with other people in my house that I was in fact sane and could see their faces. But it was late and I didn't want to disturb anyone. The next day I was walking to meet my friend. It was the same. Everyone who passed me had their head turned away that I couldn't see their faces. It was impossible, yet everyone looked like they were preoccupied with something else. Couples that were walking beside me seemed to look at stuff opposite of my direction. People walking towards me seemed to either have their head down in their phones, if not straight at the floor. It freaked me out to the max. I was a little relieved when I met up with my friend. I could see his face. I had never been so relieved to see a set of eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Not wanting to ruin his vacation, I carried on showing him around the city, only mentioning the people not looking at us towards the end of my tour. He took a quick look around and said he didn't notice anything unusual, that there were an acceptable amount of people both looking away and towards us. It was at this point that I had felt that while I turned from him to look at other people around us, I saw some people's heads turn from my direction to away, almost in unison. I asked my friend if he saw that, but he said he didn't. As I said earlier, I didn't want to ruin his vacation, but at the same time I felt uncomfortable. I cut our meetup short, telling him that I had some work stuff that I needed to take care of, and he was free to call me the next day. I went the whole journey back without seeing anyone's face, only necks or hair. When I got back home, the house was empty. Only a post-it remaining on the dining table that said my uncle and his family had gone out, and I was to make sure I didn't go hungry. I hadn't the appetite. At this point, I didn't even want to bother anyone outside to try and see their face. I stayed in my room, opening up some work applications and tried to get my mind off it. I was successful, until I closed my laptop. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the reflection of me in the window beside me turn and face me. I didn't want to look. I stood up straight away and went to the bathroom. It was after seeing myself in the mirror that I had to rush back and type this up. No, my mirror reflection in the bathroom didn't move on its own accord, but I swear the bridge of my nose is flatter than before. I think I know now what's happening. And I have an unnerving sense of dread that my facial structure is changing. My cheekbones don't feel as prominent before, and I feel like my lips are smoother. Of my eyes, I don't know what will happen, but I'm posting this up on here to tell you, if you see yourself in a camera display, don't keep looking. Walk away. If you haven't talked to anyone physically for a while, do that. And above all else, make sure you can see someone's face. I hope all you guys, gals, and everything in between enjoyed today's stories. Hopefully you will be able to get some sleep tonight. If not, sorry, sort of. If you guys do like this kind of content, and you guys do have some stories you want to share, feel free to email me at mavakaga@gmail.com. The address is there in the video. And I could definitely read them. I'll give you credit for them as well, of course. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I do post these videos daily. Make sure you smash that like button. I would appreciate that very much. And if you guys hit that bell notification icon, you will be notified each and every time I make new releases, which are daily. And yeah, let's stay safe out there. Let's hear some stories. Let's share some stories. Let's just try to make each other feel a little bit better in these down times. And hopefully we could raise our spirits a little bit. No pun intended. Guys, gals, everything in between, this is Mavakaga wishing all of you a great day, evening, morning, wherever you may be, whatever time it is now. Take care of yourself and of each other. Family first. Health is the most important thing in the world. Never forget that. All right? Peace and love. Peace and love to all my YouTube family. For now, Mavakaga out.